Alright folks, welcome to Premium Fuel Magazine. We're here in Stu's garage today, and we're going to be working outside Stu's garage on the Miata. So pretty much the goal for this video is to work on the engine bay, get that ready to do wiring, and we're going to try and plumb up the cooling system and part of the exhaust. So what we've got over here is a couple of V-band clamps and a couple of flex pipes. What we're going to do is we're going to attach a V-band to the headers. I prefer V-bands to the regular exhaust flanges that you have. V-bands just tend to seal better and you have less issues. They come off really easy, they connect really easy. The drawback with V-bands is they don't tend to be as strong as your regular bolted on exhaust flanges, but that's why you want to use a flex pipe, because as your pipes flex and pull, you don't want to put additional stress on your V-band. So anytime you have a V-band, you need to have a flex pipe. And so that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Alright, so just so you guys see what my exhaust setup is looking like right now, we've got the headers mounted backwards, just because that's the easiest way for me to execute this thing. I have a friend who's doing a similar swap right now, and he actually built custom long tube headers to snake down all the way through that space. I just don't really have the time or the skills to do that, or the need to do that. I'm not looking for absolute maximum performance out of this engine. I just need it to work. So we've got the headers mounted backwards, which is going to make the exhaust a little bit interesting, but you guys will see that when I get to it. I thought that I was going to have clearance issues on this side just because of how close it comes to the oil pressure sending unit, but actually we're gonna slide right past that. So I'm not going to actually need to change anything. I'm not sure what it's going to be like trying to take that out and put it back in. It looks like I have a lot of space, but I know from experience that looks can be deceiving. So we'll see what that's like. So we're going to go ahead and pop these headers out of here, and we're going to go ahead and put our V-bands onto the headers. Also want to show you guys what I have as far as front accessory setups. I literally have no accessories. I just have the alternator. The power steering is going to be electric power steering, just like I have in the Mustang. One of the things that was holding me up from getting this done was the alternator, because I didn't know exactly where that was going to go or how that was going to fit. I was advised that I could use a 5.0 T-Bird style alternator bracket that would help my alternator sit a little bit lower. I wasn't able to find one of those. I ended up just going on Amazon and getting a built bracket, and that actually works out fine. I don't have any hood clearance issues. The only issue I'm having right now is because this is actually a 3G style alternator, which is slightly different from a 5.0 alternator. This mount right here I'm having a little bit of trouble with, but that's fine. I can do all the mock-up that I need to do with it because I know where it is. So with that being in place, I can get my radiator hoses all plumbed up. And what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to end up welding up some custom pipes, and I'm going to make that look kind of cool. That's going to be an interesting project for me. I don't have the piping right now, but I will get it by the end of this video. So this pipe, I have to make this tube actually run around. I think I'm going to come around the front and then connect to the lower hose right there, because this is the lower hose, and we'll get into that detail later, and this is the upper hose, and this is just going to do a simple 90-degree bend directly into that, and I have a couple of ideas on how I'm going to pull that off, so we'll see how that goes. Alright, so we've got our V-bands installed, and I went ahead and put some header paint on those just to keep them from getting rusted up. So the next thing I'm going to look at now is my oil filter relocation kit. So it comes in a box like that. You got some hose. I don't know what size hose that is, but I think these fittings are -10. I'm going to verify that here in a second, because oil stuff is normally -10. But essentially what happens is this is maybe it's not really a sandwich plate. This is your adapter. So this goes in place of your oil filter on the car. You pipe it over to this guy and you actually install your oil filter on this, and you can pretty much put this in a logical place that you would want to put it. And so you can just stick this somewhere in the engine bay. So the only thing that I'm worried about right now is not necessarily like clearance with things fitting. I'm worried about clearance with heat. I definitely don't want this rubber line sitting up against this header because that's going to be the hottest thing in the engine bay. So depending on what my clearance looks like when I put this inside the car, I may have to go ahead and buy 90-degree bins just to keep everything nice and safe and away from heat. Alright guys, bad news for me. This is not a dash 10. This is the dash 10. It doesn't fit. It's actually closer to a dash 8, but not quite. If this wasn't oil pressure, I could jerry-rig that to make it work. But I need something a little bit better for that, so I'm going to have to get creative and figure something out. Alright guys, I just got back from the store and this is what I came up with. These two 90-degree fittings are essentially the same thing, they just look different, but they only had one of each in the store. And this is essentially what I came up with. So the threads on here are like 1/2 inch NA or NPT. Actually, they're 1/2 inch NPT threads, and I just got these elbow fittings, and then I got barb adapters for them to replace this guy, which was straight out. So as you can see here, the straight out fitting would have gone out that far. So I'm saving myself, you know, I don't know, maybe 2 inches, because this would have caused things to burn on the headers. So still pretty tight fit, but this gets me away from the headers, and that's going to be good for me. So the way this is going to sit in the car, if you were standing in front of the car, it's going to sit vertically like that. This end right here is going to be facing downwards towards the firewall. And in order to get this adapter plate clocked perfectly the way that you want it to sit, whether you want it to sit this way or whatever way, this piece right here, which actually threads onto your oil inlet threads, or whatever you want to call it, your oil filter threads, this is actually held in here by like a retaining clip. You actually have to assemble this when you get it. So every turn of this thing, depending on how you drop it down in there, equals 20 degrees. So you can dial this, you can dial your threads in by 20 degrees, and anything, you know, within that 20 degrees, you can also help clock this thing just by how tight you make it. So the way I had it before was about 180 degrees difference, so I just flipped this guy over, and hopefully when I put this back in the car, it's going to sit exactly where I want it to sit. Alright guys, it's going to be a little bit hard for you guys to see the fitment, but the adapter plate is down there. It's pointed sort of backwards and towards the firewall. I'm going to have to get a little bit creative with how I route my oil lines, and I'm not 100% sure where I want to put my remote oil filter. Ideally probably somewhere on the back firewall over there, but I just want to keep in mind when I go to change my oil, I don't want to have to take that thing off and dump oil all over the place. But I don't know, right now I'm thinking it's probably going to go right around that area where the throttle cable is. So that's that. On to the next small project for the day. What we've got going on here is we've got our alternator bracket, and accessory drive system. So even though these are all of the accessories we're going to be running, we're not going to get good contact around the water pump pulley the way it's currently set up if I was going to try and route a belt. So what we're going to have to do is run another pulley, which is going to be an idler pulley, and that's going to have to be over in this area here. Either I could pay a lot of money for an aftermarket solution, or I can make my own, which is what I'm leaning towards doing, which is going to be the next project for the day. So we're going to make ourselves an idler pulley slash tensioner, and it's actually going to work better than the aftermarket solutions that are out there. Alright, so what we've got here is the stock power steering bracket. I think this is the power steering bracket. I've already started cutting on it. I cut one of the arms off because that was interfering with the hood clearance. I'm going to continue cutting and chopping on this thing until it is the shape that I want it to be in. I also have the stock 5.0 tensioner, and so what we're going to do, it's actually going to be fairly easy if I can drill the holes. We're going to attach this tensioner to this bracket, and that's going to serve as my tensioner. But I have to make a couple of modifications to this bracket, so Like I said, this used to have an arm that would stick up to like right here, and that would have gone through my hood. I've already cut that off. And the other thing is I'm going to cut this section off, which actually goes to the section where the alternator is already bolted in. And I don't need 3 points of contact for this thing anyway. 2 will be more than enough for what I need. So we're just going to go ahead and cut this off and then mock this thing up back underneath the hood. Alright guys, after a lot of staring and planning, I've come up with a solution that I think is going to work out best for me. In my bucket of bolts, I found this guy right here, which I don't really know what you call these things, but it's got this square piece up here. I think this is probably like a 1/2 inch size bolt, and that actually fits perfectly down into this hole. So that will actually help lock this tensioner into place when I bolt it in. To save myself time and materials from drilling, I'm going to be using this hole right here, and as we look at it, this is how it actually sits in the car. So we're actually going to bolt it down through this hole. The drawback of me bolting it through this hole is it's got this little stabilizer or locating dowel back here, and that's actually going to be sitting up against the side of here, which isn't going to help this thing stop from turning itself. So what I've done is I've gotten myself a nut that's the same size as this dowel pin, and we're going to weld this guy right to the side of there. Everything's going to locate up and tighten down, and then the last thing we're going to do is just trim this bracket up so it doesn't look so ugly. Alright, so here's the back side of the tensioner. We've got everything mocked up the way that it's going to be secured on there. So we're going to be welding this nut to this bracket here. And I'm also going to go ahead and leave the bracket attached for this operation just so that everything is lined up and in the correct position. Now one thing that you might be concerned about is that while I'm welding this steel that I could potentially melt this aluminum. And actually that doesn't happen. Even though steel has a higher melting temperature, aluminum actually dissipates heat a lot faster. So the aluminum won't melt while I'm welding this. It actually requires a lot more energy to weld aluminum. That's part of why it's so difficult to weld aluminum and why you have to be at a much higher skill level. So that's just your little science tidbit for the day. You can weld steel right next to aluminum without damaging the aluminum, but it's still good to be a little bit careful. Alright, so here's the back side of this thing, all welded up. Here's the front side of this thing, and I actually went and just test fitted this inside the car, and everything lines up. One of the things that was cool is that because this piece right here is OEM to the car and I'm using an OEM bracket, it was already all within the same plane. Even if it was slightly off, I could shim it here where it mounts to the motor, but I don't need to. It's going to go on just like it's OEM because all I did is mix and match OEM parts. But anyways, this is almost ready to go on the car. As you see, I've got a line here. Just want to cut excess metal off of this thing just to make it look nice and neat and keep my engine bay, you know, as aesthetic as possible. Alright guys, last bit of fabrication that I'm going to be doing today is the shift knob. So, things in the car like shift knob, brake handle, stuff like that, I like to add something that's a little bit special in the car. So this shift knob is actually coming out of a 1968 Mustang. This is actually from Steve's car. He's building another drag car, which you guys will eventually see on this channel. But this is from just a stock 1968 coupe. It was going in the trash pile, and I thought that that would be very cool to put on my Mustang powered Miata. So we're going to go ahead and cut this up and adapt this for the shifter handle that's actually inside the car. Alright guys, my camera broke on me immediately after that last scene that you guys saw, so I wasn't completely finished with this thing yet, but it's done now. So we got the bracket there in the car. As you can see, I went ahead and changed out my pulley to a ribbed pulley because the ribbed side is going to be down on that. Plus it's going to help it track better once it's all on there. So I do need to measure for the correct belt. I test fit a belt on there, it wasn't very tight, so still working out the belt. That's the least of my concerns right now. So the next thing up, I went to the parts store. I looked at all their hoses until I found something that I could use. So I got a 90-degree bend off of a pipe that they had in there, a radiator hose off the shelf, and that is actually going to mate up to right here. So to get these to join together, I can either spend $10 per fitting to get the splice fittings that you put in between there, or I can make my own. The challenge with making my own is that this is 1.5 inches, and there's like literally nowhere, anywhere to buy 1.5 inch pipe. It's just an awkward size. Everything's either larger or smaller. So I have to make my own 1.5 inch pipe. Plus I need more couplers throughout the rest of this build. So I'll show you what I'm doing to get my 1.5-inch pipe. All right, so this is what I've come up with. These are the couplers that I made, and they're basically going to help me slide the pipes together that I need to join to make my own custom radiator hoses. And this piece here, it used to look really neat, but I didn't make it small enough, and I had to go and make a second cut to basically cut this thing down to size. So it's a little bit ugly, but it's still going to serve its purpose. And we're actually going to form a partially metal radiator hose for one portion of the hosing up front of the car. All right, so one other thing I wanted to show you guys is on my last trip to the junkyard, I made sure to keep an eye out for any kind of 1.5-inch pipes that I saw. If you're looking to make your own radiator hoses, one of the good ones that you can grab are the radiator hoses off of like any Tahoe or Chevy Suburban or any size, full-size Chevy trucks, because they go in all types of different directions. They have a lot of bends in them and angles, and I've already chopped this one up pretty good. This one's real nasty. I think this one came off like an old Ford Crown Vic, like an old 5.0 Crown Vic. I'm not sure, but anyways, you just want to get hoses with a lot of bends and stuff in them and a lot of straight sections and stuff that you could potentially use to cut up to make yourself other hoses. So the hoses that I found actually came in really good handy for me. I'm able to actually do a lot more with these things than what I thought, and I'm going to go ahead and plumb everything up, and you're going to see the finished product in just a second. All right, so we're putting together the last puzzle piece here of the front cooling system piping, and what we got is my long section of 1.5-inch pipe that I fabricated. And what we did is we took two 45-ish degree cuts out of it and flipped the center section around and basically put it back together, and that's going to create a 90-degree bend. So unfortunately I can't really just show you guys me welding this together just because I'm using a cell phone right now, and I don't have a tripod for it, and it just takes too much time. And plus, the last time I worked with my cell phone while I was welding and grinding, I messed up my phone. So you'll get to see it all done in just a second. All right, guys, it's late at night, and we're all done with the radiator piping. So here's a look at how it all snakes through the engine bay, right there underneath the core support. A little bit of a sneak peek at what you guys are going to see in the next video. We got some wiring going on here. And the other radiator hose goes right through there, right up the fender, and around back. Alright guys, so I don't think I've shown you guys what's going on in the trunk just yet, so we'll go ahead and show you now. So basically, this hose right here comes from the engine, cycles through the radiator. This is a 2-pass radiator. It comes back out on the same side at the bottom, runs up this way. This is an electric water pump, and this pushes your water back to the engine. To the piping that you saw up front. So that's about it. That's a summary, and that is the update for the Miata for this week. Thanks for checking out the video. We'll catch you on the next one.